episode of Chordplay, and this is the Chords of Night Ranger, and I've had some requests to feature Jeff Watson and Brad Gillis, so I figured I could look at their chords first, and I'm definitely going to follow this looking at some licks and some lead ideas too. But Night Ranger formed in San Francisco in 1978, and just blew up in the 80s, and definitely had a lot of, famous albums, very popular tours, a lot of, hits on the radio, videos on MTV, and guitar magazine covers and all sorts of stuff. So Jeff and Brad are definitely, a legendary duo from the 80s. And, Brad had all these crazy, whammy bar tricks and harmonics and stuff, and he still does, of course. And famously, worked with Ozzy Osbourne, the Speak of the Devil tour, after Randy Rhoads passed away. And then definitely Jeff Watson, the eight-fingered, tapping wizard. Great guitarist, and I'm friends with Jeff actually on Facebook, and he's a very interesting, friend. I've never met Jeff in person, but the posts and things that he, contributes on social media is really interesting, where he's feeding deer in his backyard, and there's a lot of, nature and preserving, Mother Earth, which I think is great. But there's a lot of cool stuff, definitely, if you dive into Night Ranger's music, and the guitar work is great. So here we go. And with a band like Night Ranger, I mean, they had radio hits, they had MTV videos that were very popular, and like I said earlier, very popular tours too. But they were kind of like the pioneers of bridging, movies and film and TV shows with music. And I think back in the 80s, like the big soundtrack, of course, was The Big Chill. That was huge, hit the top of the charts, and I think it made everybody realize, like, whoa, I think we can market these soundtracks to the record-buying, music-listening public. And if you go through Night Ranger's music, of course, Sister Christian, has been in a bunch of movies, and I hopelessly associate that with Boogie Nights. That scene in Boogie Nights is just historic. It's like, man, that's perfect. And there's a whole bunch of other films too. So, and video games and TV shows and stuff too. So here's an image with just a dozen places you can find Night Ranger's music in film, TV, and video games, and there's a whole bunch of other places. This lesson's actually going to focus on 80s Night Ranger, even though the band has continued. I mean, Red Beach and Joe Hoekstra and a whole bunch of people have played with Night Ranger. But we're going to stay with the classic lineup, in the 80s, Brad Gillis and Jeff Watson era. And, Jeff definitely came back. I think they recorded, some albums that were more recent than the classics. But there's really nothing beats, the classic stuff from the 80s. So that's what we're going to hit in this lesson. All right, with the opening, that was You Can Still Rock in America, one of my favorite Night Ranger songs. And it starts with that open A string, kind of rising bar trick, and then a chord riff, something like this. There we got the the bar dip with the open A, and then you're doing basically these slash chords. So there's a G over A and a D over A right here. And you're just basically smearing that C into that A power chord. And then loop all that again. Eventually they start doing the C to C sharp move into that A power chord. And at the end of that, cycle, I think you do that 4 times. Then you hit 3 harmonics right here on the 4th and 5th fret on the A, D, and G string. Little wiggle on the bar, and then an E power chord, and then the single note riff that walks down. Something like that. Great riff too, I love that. next is Why Does Love Have to Change, which is also from the Midnight Madness album, and it's really cool. Something like this. Tasty. So it basically starts with this kind of melodic A minor arpeggio based idea like this. And we're just kind of coming down part of the scale right there too in A minor. And then end that with a G power chord down here. And you're going to answer that chord with another part of the scale right here. And then go to a D power chord. And they start pedaling that open D string a little bit. And then you're going to come down a little bit more. And then a C power chord. And this is very unusual. This is going to be a B6 flat 9. You know, implied, but that's kind of what's happening right there at the end. Very interesting tonality, but I love the way they sneak that in there. Next up is Sing Me Away, which is from the Midnight Madness album, and we're playing these partial chords along the D and the G string, which is a very familiar, chord strategy on guitar. But Night Ranger used them and created this very memorable and kind of unique riff, like this. Right there we're doing an A and we're sliding back to that little piece of a G, so it's like a G over A. A couple scratches, and then you're going to basically add this D note right there, which is going to change that to an A sus4 and then pull off back to that A major. And then basically do that A down to G again. Start banging that open A. Like that. The second time, you're going to basically slide down to that G and do everything the same. And right there, you're going to sneak up and grab this D note, which is going to change that to a G power chord. And then a couple scratches to a partial F sharp minor. And then a couple scratches to a partial G. And then start the whole thing over. Next up is This Boy Needs to Rock, which is from 7 Wishes up there on the wall, and it's something like this. Reminds me of Van Halen a little bit. We've got this bouncy, really bright, active chord part, and it starts, and we're once again kind of using these partial chords. So it's E to B to down to A, and then stay on that A, and then you're going to E over G sharp right here, like this. And you're gonna walk up. Kind of a partial chord right there, partial A to this F sharp power chord. There's kind of like two chunks on this E power chord, and then you're going to do this, E over G sharp again, So it's like E over G sharp and then a partial B to partial A. And then this A, back to that E. And you're doing, and right there, after you go back to that E over G sharp, you're going to walk up like that. Get this little descending kind of single note thing at the end there. Loop all that again. And then the last time you're doing almost kind of like a blues scale, like F sharp blues. Cool riff. Okay, next up is Goodbye, which is also from Seven Wishes. You can see I've switched to an acoustic guitar. And this is honestly the hardest part, or the hardest, segment of this entire lesson. The chords are very challenging. And you have to think, and it's going to remind some of you of Crash Into Me by Dave Matthews Band. But you have to remember, this is a decade before Dave Matthews ever played Crash Into Me. So it's something like this. It's tricky. Chords are very challenging. This is going to wreck your wrist, and you definitely have to stretch out, and you're maintaining this E5 chord shape pretty much the entire time, and then the bass notes are what's changing. So that's what reminds me of Crash Into Me by Dave Matthews Band, and I'm not saying that he stole it from Night Ranger, but after kind of working with both those guitar parts, it's like, yeah, maybe Dave Matthews is a closet Night Ranger fan. I have no idea. But we're starting with this. And that's basically an E sus2, because you've got that F sharp up on the high E. And that's basically the picking pattern throughout this whole, guitar part. And then you're going to add this G sharp and do the same thing. And then open up that A string. And then you're going to descend the bass note from C sharp to B. And then do the open A again. Right here, one of my all-time favorite chords for sure. That's a B add 11. And then you want to finish with that E sus2 again. So that's really tricky, definitely demanding on the fret hand, because you have to basically glue these fingers, down, and then you're kind of moving those bass notes, which is tricky, and there is that one chord shift for that B add 11. But this is very challenging. So one more time. It's definitely a handful. So, beware of that guitar part. That's killer. The last example is from Don't Tell Me You Love Me, which is from Dawn Patrol, and it was Night Ranger's first hit. And it starts with this clean guitar part that's kind of slipping and sliding and shifting, back and forth. And then a distorted guitar comes in, on top of it. So the intro is like this. So that's going to seem like A and like maybe a little piece of B add 11. But it's actually played over F sharp because the other guitar comes in like this. Pretty basic, but with that other guitar part, played against F sharp, those chords are going to be really unusual. So that's like an F sharp, implied F sharp 13, and then F sharp minor 7 like that. So depending on which chord is being, shifted, but it's all over that F sharp, root note. And then you'll hear it like a ringing A power chord, and the keyboards doing or something like that. Really cool, and he's kind of chunking out that F sharp power chord. You know, and you're basically lifting up that fretted part and grabbing that partial E back there. So it's almost like a F sharp minor 7, kind of. Back to that A power chord. But really interesting guitar part, and I love the way the parts are put together in that song, and that's very early in Night Ranger's career. But what a great guitar song, you know, it's awesome. All right, that's going to wrap this episode of Chordplay with the Chords of Night Ranger, and definitely, you know, exciting band, really interesting, you know, solos and fills and riffs and licks and all kinds of stuff happening. And Jeff and Brad worked together really well. You know, they complemented each other because they did have different styles. And you'll find that in a lot of two-guitar bands, you know, whether it's, you know, classic groups, Thin Lizzy or some bands like that, or Maiden or Judas Priest, or obviously Night Ranger, even groups like Collective Soul, you know, the way they orchestrate their parts and they mix, you know, clean guitars with distorted guitars, or chord riffs, you know, with single note parts and melodies. Really interesting. So check out some, you know, Night Ranger and really study like the way they fleshed out their guitar parts, which, you know, you definitely learn a lot as far as, you know, layering parts and, you know, creating parts that kind of accent or complement each other. You know, it's really important. So anyway, leave some feedback and some comments. Please subscribe to Late Night Lessons, and I'll be back before you know it with more content and material. Thank you.